Hey there, I'm Jason Gold. I'm back with another episode of Investor Insights. This is where I give straight talk on all things investor relations. Today, we're talking about business model transitions and the importance of being extra transparent when going through one of those. So what's the setup? Business model transitions are all the rage right now. There's a lot of companies moving to subscription from on-premise, particularly in the software world. But there's hardware companies and all sorts of companies that are moving into the subscription economy. And that requires a change in the business model, and it requires holding investors' hands while you do that, because the numbers can be all over the place when that happens. Now, there's tons of successful companies that have done it. I think that Adobe was the first and best at how to make this happen. They are really the poster child for how to do this the right way. But there's lots of other companies that have done a great job. The thing is that they can be really confusing to investors. And so I'm here to talk about what you need to do to help investors through one of those transitions and to minimize the downside impact to your stock when going through one of those. What you have to remember first, before I get to each of the details, is that there's always tons of new investors following your company. Think about a big mutual fund complex. The same analyst that you have following your company today likely moves to a different part of the firm in 2 years. And so there's always this constant recycling of folks into your name. And so the first thing that you need to just really keep in mind is that you have to talk at a very basic level to folks. Now, people will ask follow-up questions. I'm not suggesting that anyone is dumb or can't follow along, but rather you need to consider that there's always new people rotating through. And so what you told them 6 months or a year ago might be a whole different group of people. So just keep that in mind as we go through these 7 or 8 items. Number one, what should you do when going through a transition to hold people's hands? The first thing you need to do is realize that the accounting team is not who's following your company. Yes, every one of these investors has an accounting team, particularly the big mutual fund complexes, but they're not the ones paying attention to you. It's just a regular business analyst. So recognize that the people that you're talking to, the analysts, they're not accounting experts. And so when you start with all the accounting prognostications or the accounting rules, they're not necessarily going to follow along. So give them very clear instructions about what it means and how revenue, for example, is recognized over the period, providing them with examples before and after. Number two, remember that you spend 40, 50, 60 hours a week following your company. But the people on the other end of the call with you can follow, if they're on the sell side, 30, 40, or 50 stocks. And if they're investors, they might follow 100 or even 200 stocks. So rather than going right into the details with them, start at a higher level and remind them exactly what you do and why this is important. And I have other video content on why repeating your message is so important. This is something that I come back to a lot. Understanding and empathizing with the fact that your investors are all over the place in terms of focusing on so many different companies, and you really have to get into their shoes to listen to how you sound to them. Number three, remind them why you're going through this transition. Is it somehow better for the business? Will you have greater lifetime value per customer? Will your retention improve? Will your profitability or cash flow improve? Whatever the reason your company decided to undertake this business model transition, remind people why you're doing that so that they can tell that to themselves as they go through this journey with you and they see some of these scary numbers. Number four, go over with them how it will work, line by line on the income statement. Maybe you have one line that goes down, maybe you have one line that goes to zero while another line comes up. Every company is a little bit different. You need to be extra communicative with people to show them exactly how the income statement, the balance sheet, and the cash flow will fluctuate as you go through the transition during each stage. I think one of the best practices people can do is put stages around the various levels of completion and timing associated with each of those stages. So you think you're going to be done with the transition in 3 years, maybe stage 1 lasts 18 to 24 months, stage 2 lasts from month 24 to month 36. Every company is a little bit different, but help investors understand how the pieces of the puzzle fit together and flow over time. Number 5, it's important to tell them what do they get for having gone through this transition with you. Realize the income statement's going to look a little bit ugly. People are going to be a little bit scared. They're not going to know exactly what's happening. You have to show them what is the prize at the end of the rainbow for sticking with you. Is there some revenue or revenue growth rate that you expect to achieve exiting the transition? Maybe you expect to get to some level of profitability or cash flow at the end of the transition. Maybe it's you expect a retention number or a customer count, or I don't know, every company is different. You have to give them what is specific to you. What will investors have at the end of this transition? And will that be enticing for them to stay on throughout this journey? Number 6, you have to give them tools to evaluate your progress between today when you announce the transition and when you get where you're going. If the income statement or revenue is not the right metric to evaluate you because revenue is going to be moving in the other direction as you go through the depths of the transition, give them something else. Is it bookings? Is it billings? Is it customer count? Is it RPO? Is it ARR? There's a million different metrics people can be looking for. What is it that's driving your business that people need to see in order to judge, are you on track with the transition? One of the things that I like to do is give people incremental updates, progress updates along the way to say how you're doing and to support that with the set of numbers. Number 7, and it goes with number 6, is provide them with extra metrics. This is really important, especially if your income statement isn't the item that will be telling the truth about where you're going. I've had clients that started off on a transition and didn't change any of their metrics, and no one believed them. In fact, people thought the business was moving in the wrong direction because there weren't additional metrics to judge the pace and maturity of the transition. All they saw was revenue growth stagnate and begin to go the other way, and they couldn't figure out why. Whatever the company said didn't quite match up with the numbers, so give them extra metrics to be able to track your progress. And you can give those metrics only during the transition. You don't have to give these metrics forever. You can say when you start, we are going to be giving you these metrics to help you evaluate our progress during the transition, but at the end of the transition, we'll be taking those metrics away. People will understand. And then number 8 is give explicit guidance for everything. To the extent that you can guide each of the items in your income statement, cash flow, perhaps even certain elements of the balance sheet, if that's going to move around, like deferred revenue, for example, give as much guidance as you can. That allows you to hold on to some semblance of order when it comes to sell-side models and consensus. You don't want numbers being all over the place, that the headlines on Bloomberg have you missing numbers like crazy because you haven't been able to gather and corral all the sell side. But it also just helps people understand how the model moves together. If license is going to do this and maintenance is going to do this, but ARR is going to do this, whatever the mix of items is, give as much guidance as you can. That will also allow the notes that come out after each quarter to say that you were in line or better with each of those metrics, rather than you doing well, thinking you're doing a great job, but missing a bunch of the consensus metrics. What's the conclusion here? Going through a transition is like going to a scary movie. Think about when you were a kid and you went to a scary movie. What did you want? You wanted someone to hold your hand. You wanted someone to make you feel better and tell you it was going to be okay. This is scary. You are, in essence, taking numbers down throughout these transitions and asking investors to just believe you that you're going to get to the promised land. So you have to do items 1 through 8 that I went through before, which again are: 1, remember they're not accounting experts. Number 2, remember that they only spend 2, maybe 3 hours a quarter on this, and you spend 60 hours a week on this. Number 3, remind them why you did this. Number 4, tell them how the transition is going to work. Number 5, tell them what they get at the end of the rainbow for sticking with you. Number 6, give them tools to evaluate you. Number 7, give them extra metrics that they can look at your progress. And number 8, give them explicit guidance for everything so that you control the models. Hold their hand, make them feel better throughout this transition, and your transition will go as smoothly as possible. As always, thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you here again next time.